Welcome to Paranormal Crossings Into the Light. I'm Aaron.
And I'm James.
We have a very special show for you today. We have the magnificent, the outstanding, the outspoken, the wonderful, the talented, the author, the paranormal investigator.
Historian.
The historian, that's right. Mr. Jeff Davis. Welcome.
Hey, thank you, guys. I'm actually looking for the really impressive person who you just mentioned, but it just...
And we kicked him out.
Oh, well, you know. Clyde left, so...
yeah.
No. Welcome, Jeff.
It is...
You are all but more, my friend.
And Aaron, every time I see you, there's a little bit less of you, but what is...
I'm going for the disappearing act, you know.
But
slowly but surely, right?
Whatever I see, I always like and am happy.
Oh, well, thank you.
You see, cannot say anything bad about a man who loves the Three Stooges that much.
Right.
That's right.
I knew it. If I wore this today, I knew I was going to get
Now, is that in reference to you and I and Darren? Because we have to mention Darren is not here today, but he will be returning next week.
Right. Well, you know, the wife wanted to get all of us a shirt, but I think, obviously.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. So
Yeah, who would be,
right
Right there.
Yeah, there we go. So we're not going to go into a whole skit from
No,
Three
please
Stooges.
don't.
All right, so yeah.
Let's get back on
That's
topic.
right. So, how's your week been? Before we get started, what's been going on with you? Anything new and exciting? I know things are moving forward with your paranormal team. So
It's slowly coming together, yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to be bringing on, it sounds like, a new member here.
Well,
within
that's
the next
exciting.
week or so. We're just going to get together, Heidi and myself, with her and kind of talk with her a little bit more so I can find out more about her, because Heidi already knows.
Heidi knows.
Heidi knows everything.
Everything, right?
So, yeah. But my understanding is this person's already had a team she was on or ran or whatever, and she's also done some TV shows.
Nice.
Boom.
Ooh, hey,
So
stepping
I
up.
want
All
to
right.
find some more info on all this.
Awesome.
So, but
Very good.
We're starting to grow.
Very good. Well,
Works for me.
growth is always nice.
Absolutely.
It's always nice to kind of step out a little bit and add more people. And
Yeah, and we're still looking for more. If anybody is interested, you can go to our webpage.
Which is?
www.gaps.com, or even on our Facebook page, Guardian Angel Paranormal Society.
Wonderful.
So,
Awesome.
Yeah.
And so, Mr. Davis, you've been a busy man.
I have indeed. It's been since a lot of the COVID restrictions have eased, because part of, especially we're on TV right now, a lot of TV shows, entertainment-oriented establishments, they're in overdrive trying to catch up. And so in the last couple of months, I've done the total of 4 appearances for 2 television shows. And I've revamped my website and restarted local events, including my ghost walks, we can talk about later. But
Absolutely.
it's just been a really busy time, and I'm glad for that. There's nothing worse than sitting at home.
Right? Which we've all done
doing,
way
right?
too long. It's been way
Absolutely.
too long. And speaking of that, so you mentioned doing some TV shows. Is that something that you can talk about a little bit, or would you rather?
A little bit, of
Okay,
course.
yeah.
The thing that goes along with being on these TV shows is until they air, you really can't talk too much about them, can you?
Right.
Because-
NDA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Non-disclosure agreements, and some of that has to do with the very real danger of somebody finding out, well, a production company is doing episodes in Salem, Oregon, and at a haunted venue, and they film it and they've scheduled it, and then a rival company finds out about it, and then
they go in and
release it first and scoop them. And so loose lips sinking a lot of ships. I can't talk too much in a lot of detail, but one of the television shows is The Dead Files, and this will be my 7th and 8th appearances on that TV show, which I think is the record. And And it's always a pleasure to work with them on the show. And I'll just say it's not a fake show in that they aren't inventing things. As a matter of fact, if anyone listening to this broadcast is curious and they would like, for whatever their own personal reasons, to share it on a television show, it's not fake in that the criteria. I had a long talk with one of the producers who said, listen, this has got to be a real haunt. We don't want people faking haunts, and this has to actually frighten the people who are experiencing it, because it'll all come out if this a lie. And so if anyone has those top two criteria, they can contact the show or email me somehow, and I will forward information to the show. They're already programmed out the number of episodes for this year, but they're looking at their 2022 season.
Now, do they say, okay, this is the area we're investigating, and how much time do you spend researching your part? Does that take you quite a while to research, or is this something that you already know about, or how does that work for you?
In some cases, some cases it's everything. In some cases, they have people they will go to in different parts of the country. Mm-hmm. So when they are filming episodes here in the Northwest, sometimes, but not all the time, I get a contact. And they already know where the haunt is. This their show. Mm-hmm. And they start looking at, well, what good history or verifiable history has happened here, and sometimes I know quite a bit about it because simply because of my background, military history, Northwest history, and just in general the settlement period. Because of my archaeology and history background, I do know the overall trends in 19th century history in the Pacific Northwest. So that helps. They have their own historians that do research for them, like master historian, but every single time I've been able to bring something to it. And it's not scripted at all. And so Steve and I do have a chat about it. They have a certain series of common sense questions that again, this isn't scripted, but so Jeff, did somebody get killed here? And so sometimes yes, sometimes no, sometimes I don't know.
Now, of course, what we see on screen is just a snippet. I'm sure the conversation that you have is a lot longer. How much of that do we actually see? How much is cut down?
On average, the interview, you're really lucky if you get 2 minutes. As far as 2 minutes of airtime.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And so the questioning and answering cross questioning can be about 2 hours. This other show, which I can't talk about location wise and topic wise, our conversation lasted 6 hours.
Wow.
And we were very far ranging. It was tremendously spontaneous, and it's a good thing that I was immersed in that part of the history. And the funniest thing was I got sunburned. The location was outside, and so only half of me got sunburned.
Wow.
Because we were standing there in one spot for that long, and it was cool enough that you didn't notice the sun. And there's a lot of wind blowing. I'm sure a lot of people have had that, particularly like four-wheeling or on the back of a motorcycle, something like that.
Right.
And it was very spontaneous. We exchanged a lot of information and viewpoints. And if you're interested when the episodes air, if you have time on the schedule, I'll come back and we can talk about them.
Definitely.
Post. Yeah,
of course.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure a lot of viewers want to know: do you ever have any interaction with Amy?
No, I've never met her.
Have you ever met her?
No.
Never.
Yeah, you got my question.
Did I take the question
you took
from
it
you?
from me.
Yeah, no, Steve and I, the first episode that I appeared on was filmed in Vancouver, Washington, in
I remember that.
Esther Short Park.
Yeah.
and they were just learning how to work together. It was still very early in their production history, and so Steve and I stood nose to nose, essentially, kind of on our marks for focusing for almost 3 hours, and a lot of that was not Q&A. A lot of that was
just standing.
Yeah, just standing waiting because there's a big clock tower in there in the Esther Short Park that every 15 minutes it would have a little talk about the salmon and its importance to the native peoples. But there were cars, there were trucks, there's small engine planes, there were Portland International Airport planes going by and trains. And so
all the background noises.
Yeah, and Steve and I just spent a couple of hours in between chatting. He's a former Marine. He is a retired homicide detective. And we got to be quite friendly. And every time I see him, it is actually a pleasure because he is a typical New Yorker in that he's full of attitude, but he's got a big heart, and he's always been nice to me.
Can we show that picture, Andrew, of the scene shot of the cameraman showing that one particular scene? Yeah, there's a scene of you and Steve. I think you're probably showing him what you're bringing to him and talking about. What scene was that actually? Or what episode?
I can't remember the name of the episode. This was filmed up in the Olympia area, and it involved a haunted location that had some associations actually with the various Native American settler conflicts of the 1850s, where one of the war leaders actually kind of came in on parole, and he was supposed to be under protected status, and he was assassinated, and that was kind of the overreaching arc for me, history-wise, about that. Not very much of that made it through the cuts.
Okay.
But that was at a wildlife refuge.
Okay. Interesting. And then we also have a picture that you brought us of you and Steve. And so if we could show that picture as well. I love that picture. It just brings out the other side of Steve. You know, he always seems so serious, you know, a former homicide detective, former Marine. But it also shows that the genuine, caring and happy side, you know, you too.
A different character.
Different character that we don't always see, you know, on camera.
And there's, like most of my life, there's an ironic and interesting story about that. I had done all these episodes with the Dead Files, and I think this was the 6th episode. I actually didn't have a selfie of myself and Steve, like a posed "Hey buddy" shot.
Right.
And so this is one of these things about you try and be respectful.
Sure.
And I have like my list of do's and don'ts about getting asked back on a show, and one of them was don't rush the talent. And so it occurred to me, I don't have a picture of me and Steve. And I got that distant shot you just showed.
Right.
But we're, you know, that's while really interesting, and it would make it like a great biographical shot, it doesn't actually, you could phony that up. So, but, you know, with us kind of that close together. And so I told that to the producer, and he said, "You don't have a picture of yourself and Steve?" Steve. And so we took some time and did that.
Now, also on your list, I'm sure you, somewhere on your list it says, "Do not challenge Steve to an arm wrestle," right?
or shooting match either.
Or you're right, or shooting match. Yeah.
Yeah, he's great guns.
Yeah. As you mentioned, privately, of course. So aside from those shows, you know, I'd like to get back to all this. What got you into the paranormal in the first place? I don't think I've ever asked you that.
Well, really, I thought I bored everybody with that one.
No, I don't think so. Not me, at least.
This dates back to my childhood. Among other things, those of us who remember drive-in theaters.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Or our parents talking about drive-in theaters. I was born in 62. And my...
I'm a 60s kid. Come on.
And
so are you.
Late 60s,
if anyone who's watching this has probably heard of Hammer Studios in England, all of those horror movies with Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing in the 1960s. In the late 60s to early 70s, they released a lot of their catalog in the United States, and a lot of it went to drive-in theaters. And my dad was nothing if not, we're not paying a babysitter, they're coming to the movies with us. So here at the age of 6 or 7 years old, I'm watching Peter Cushing kill Christopher Lee yet again. You know, and on the big screen, the fangs are 80 feet high and the blood droplets. But also is around that same time, much more profoundly, my parents gave me a black and white television as a 9-year-old kid, and there used to be pre-Elvira a show called Victor Ives and Friends, where they reran out of Portland, the Portland studio, I think KATU. They ran all these 30s and 40s pre-Svengoolie, all these movies. And I remember the original Mummy, Boris Karloff.
Oh yeah.
You know, he's only in bandages for the first 2 minutes of the show. But people who watch that, you get to see like in the pool of Adolf Bey or whatever name he took on, this whole progression, reincarnation and magic and archaeology. And that really hooked me. That's also why I became an archaeologist. And running parallel through my life. Sometimes archaeology's been a little more important. Sometimes it's been the paranormal. And it's kind of gone back and forth.
No.
So not necessarily one incident got you into that paranormal?
Correct. I remember like being 13 or 14, coming across the author Hans Holzer, who a lot of people know about. And he was the first one whose books were not over the top. They were not full of overly horrific. They always seemed very down to earth, matter of fact, and historically based. And so I kind of modeled myself. Once I started researching and writing about it, I modeled along what I thought was an ideal that he put forth.
So what prompted you to start writing about the weird places and paranormal and things like that then?
Part of it was almost in a way a challenge. In the 1990s, I lived in England for a year when I went to graduate school. And as we're packing up to come home, I was looking for presents or gifts that didn't take up too much room, were not too expensive to put in the luggage. And I went to the University of Sheffield, and I was at one of these little touristy shops, and this one woman had collected ghost stories, and she had Ghosts of Sheffield volumes 1, 2, 3, and 4 that were she did the typesetting and layout and probably in word processor and had them printed out, taken to the local equivalent of the Kinko's, and printed them out and stapled them in the middle and folded them. And so these little booklets were on sale. And I said, you know what? If she can do it, I can do it too. And at a certain point, I was in between military assignments and I had a lot of extra money. So I talked to my wife and I said, the archaeology work is on the downside. I'd like to work on the paranormal. And so that is my first book attempt, was a booklet.
What was her reaction to that?
I'm doing her reaction.
She's like, what?
Okay.
You just went to school for a year.
We've got the money, but if you don't actually start making money in a year, you're going back to work. Yes, dear. And fortunately I did, although self-publishing for individuals to do it all, rather than finding a small press to pay to do the layout. You know, with computers in the late 90s, the software just coming online to actually publish a book, it was still infancy period, and I made a lot of mistakes. The first book, only through partially my error, but also the printing service, my first book had over 60 errors in it, grammatical and layout errors. And so I took delivery of 5,000, 4,000 copies of it, opened the first box, looked at the book, looked at the pages and said,
Oh my gosh.
But I still had to sell it.
Right.
Because I'd invested thousands of dollars in that. But it teaches you humility.
Oh, I bet.
And do a better job the next time.
Right. Now, had you ever investigated in England?
Not per se, not like we think of it today.
Right.
We went to as many haunted locations as we could, and there were some archaeology related trips we took through the department, but I always made sure that there was like some kind of haunt nearby, and I was interested in kind of folklore stuff. We went to some like holy wells where the water, you bathe your eyes and it's supposed to cure this or various ailments. And in a lot of these ancient sites, I was always interested in Herne the Hunter and the Wild Hunt, which I was just talking to somebody else about. It was a great time. The only problem was we were poor students and didn't have any money.
Right.
And so that limited our trips. We didn't have a car. So sometimes we would find another student or two, and we'd like pool our money, pay for the gas, and go stay at youth hostels wherever we were going. But that's how we did. We went all the way up to Edinburgh, Scotland, and all the way down to South Dorset.
Wow.
And it was maybe the best year of my life.
That's amazing.
God, if I could only do that for a year.
I know. Let's go.
Right?
Well, I saved for 3 years to make that happen.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, it's not cheap.
No.
And especially back then. I mean, wow.
Well, the cost of the education, though, for a master's program, I paid extra because I was out of, from a foreign country. But their university tuition rate for a master's program that was 1 year, it was only about $7,500.
Really?
Yeah, you start pricing per credit, graduate credit at an American university, even in the 90s. You're like looking at $2,000 per credit or $1,500 per credit.
Wow.
So I kind of lucked out there.
Now, what got you? So you went. So you were in the military. This was before or after? This was before school, correct?
Well, I have a 32-year career in the military. That was active and reserve.
Gotcha.
At various times, 3 years in the 1980s, I, among other things, guarded nuclear warheads that we don't admit we ever had somewhere else. And then I spent 18 months as an infantry guy, and then Army reservists, then ROTC. And it ended up at various times. Just the Bosnia. I did 9 months in Bosnia. That was a mobilization. I did 2 mobilizations to Southwest Asia after September 11th. And so it was in between all these times. Even when you and I first met, I was still wearing the uniform on weekends in special assignments. So it's 94. So I got my commission in 1987. Most of that time up to my graduate school was an Army reservist, and I did archaeology work throughout the Pacific Northwest. Then I went to graduate school, and shortly after coming back, I got mobilized to Bosnia.
Wow.
And then came back from Bosnia and started doing the ghost books in between a little bit of archaeology.
Well, I know I've told you this privately, but thank you for your service.
Most of the time it was a pleasure, but not always.
I'm sure. And so what an impressive resume. I mean, unbelievable. You military career, and you're still heavily involved with veterans in military and then in archaeology, and then an author, historian. So what got you to jump into investigating throughout all of this? And don't think you're not going to talk about the one episode of and I'm having trouble remembering exactly the name of the show. Is it Shit White Men?
Oh, that white people.
Yeah. You can say shit. It's fine on this network. You can.
Yeah. This is my kind of podcast.
Yeah. And we can talk about that later. But yeah, what got you into the actual investigating? Is it because of the books? And I mean, does just everything you've done with the archaeology and the history and just all the, I mean, obviously you can't be a paranormal investigator, and I've said this before, you can't be a paranormal investigator and not appreciate history and understand history.
You asked me like 9 questions.
You're right, I did. So what got you to leap into actual paranormal investigating as well?
This is part of what happens when you're researching and writing, even approaching it as a historian. If you want to think of this as folklore solely, that's when you start talking to other people who've done it, and or you say, well, let me try. And bear in mind, this was in the late 1990s. When I remember a digital audio recorder that recorded like 30 seconds, and that was the total of his memory, was like $30 or $40. You know, these were expensive toys before they became affordable and functional. And so I bear in mind Hans Holzer as well. Sometimes I would go with a clairvoyant to visit locations. Other times it would just be me solely with the property owner. And so I started looking at how the investigating part works, scientific curiosity. And I came across a book written by a guy named Peter Underwood called The Ghost Hunter's Guide. I think the original version that came out in the 1980s. So it's all non-tech, non-computerized, paper, and some electronic gizmos, but a lot of it focused on investigating techniques. Not so much being in love with the technology. And so that's how I started. Pardon me, everybody. We don't have a delay button for burping. I'm sorry. So that's kind of, it was just curiosity about it. And in my first 3 books, which were my other 3, not the first one, but the next set, Ghost, Critters, and Sacred Places of Washington and Oregon, each chapter, there is a chapter at the end of each book what looks like ghost hunting techniques, because far too many people will learn ghost hunting on TV. Or learn ghost hunting just from chatting with people, and they don't understand how these scientific gizmos, which are not designed for ghost hunters, are used and misused. You remember when digital cameras first came out, and everybody got orb photos, and it turned out that it was actually a flaw in the design of the camera, where the flash was too close to the lens, and so it's not able to focus on dust particles. Plus, the chips were not that efficient, and that created a glitch where the software mixed with the hardware that created all these orb photos. And as digital cameras have gotten more and more sophisticated, people, gosh and begorra, don't get as many ghost orb photos, do they? But when they do, I tend to take notice of it now.
Yeah, definitely.
And there was some heartache and grief from people who were no longer fans after they read the chapter,
right? And
said, "You've totally destroyed my ghost hunting theories.
You ruined it for me. Oh my gosh!" Yeah. So, do you have any books coming out? A new book on the horizon?
In the works. The last book I put out pre-COVID was Vancouver, USA Ghosts Volume 1. And as part of the editing process, just like a television show or a podcast, you end up with more material than you can fit within the parameters of the program or the book. So I have about a third of Vancouver, USA Ghost Volume 2 already laid out. And so it'll be a matter of finishing that. And on the more serious history side, I was thinking about, I had started writing a field guide to the Pacific Northwest, because we are in what was the Old West before the Old West. Arizona, New Mexico, 1880s, right? 1890s. Unfortunately, it's really hard to phrase this, the settlers were coming here in the 1840s. And the Native American conflicts and the Old West settler violence played itself out from the 1840s until the late 1870s. So this was the Old West before it was the Old West.
Right. Wow.
And we're in Portland, Oregon, and I could take you to essentially a battlefield site that is just more or less been forgotten by people in the Columbia River Gorge, about 40 miles from here.
Really?
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, bye.
Yeah. We'll take the cameras
Andrew,
and
let's go.
Andrew. We're all going to go on a road trip. All right, let's do that. We need to do something like that sometime. Just go on location, right?
For sure.
All right. So, all right. Well, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more with Mr. Davis, but we're going to talk a little bit about some ghost walks.
Sure.
And I want to talk more about, or hear more about Vancouver Barracks.
Sure.
You have a lot more information, and so
Happy to share it.
awesome. All right, so stay tuned with us as we talk more with Mr. Jeff Davis. So don't go anywhere. We're not.
Don't.
All right.
Welcome back. We're with our friend, our historian, paranormal investigator, and TV reality person. Why not? Jeff Davis. Welcome back.
Yeah. Don't forget to add at times unemployed bum.
I can't do that with you, my
which is
friend.
okay. We were talking during break. I was, if people are kind of curious, my website, I do have a little bit, a brief bio, but you can look, believe it or not, I bought into the newer part of tech, and I have an IMDb account.
Oh, that's right.
So you can look me up on IMDb.
Do you go by Jefferson or Jeff on IMDb?
This is the funny thing. There are, I think there are 8 of us Jefferson Davises on IMDb.
Wow.
So I am Jefferson Davis III.
Aye, Captain.
So, but I have a longer bio on that, and I have a list of publications too, including some of my history work for people who are just generally curious. And there are links, because this is IMDb, there are links to the episodes. So people, if they want to know what year of which show, because you and I were both on Ghost Adventures as well, different episodes. But have you got an IMDb account?
I started one. I need to finish. I'm so bad about that. Yeah.
You should be punished.
I will be now.
Yeah, your fans will come in, and I've got to say, because I met you on a different radio program.
Absolutely.
And you and I just kind of like collided, but Paranormal Crossings is quite the phenomenon, and I've never had fans send me some of the photos your fans have sent you.
Oh, okay. All right. We won't talk about that.
You got stuff going on you haven't told me?
No, they requested photos from me.
Oh.
Is what it was. So, yeah.
I haven't had that
Nice
happen
spin
either.
there.
Anyway. We won't talk about it.
No.
Moving along. Do you have
Moving
questions
along,
for our guest?
The Vancouver Barracks.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, and that's how I first met you. My sister had read about you and wanted to buy some books and heard you were going to be out at the barracks. And so I tagged along, and that's how we first met. I had bought a couple of your books, you signed them, and I cherished them forever.
Until you lost them.
Until I lost them, and no, I threw them across the bridge as I was going back to Oregon. No, I'm just kidding. I would never. No, but no, that's how I first met you. And but so tell us a little bit about your history with the Vancouver Barracks.
And how long have you been doing that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up around the barracks. My father was in the military as well, and he was stationed at the Vancouver Barracks. And so at various times we were down at the barracks. So I was in and out of some of these buildings as a kid. And when I enlisted in the Army Reserves at the age of 17, and still in high school, my unit was assigned out of one of these buildings. And over my career, I was in and out of almost every single building at the barracks that existed at the time. And then after September 11th, remember I told you I kept on getting mobilized, but in my Army Reserve capacity, I was assigned as a military historian to one of the units there. That was my, to use the phrase, terminal assignment. And so I, in effect, to use the fancy word, I was the de facto post historian, because there was no other Army historian there. The National Park Service is there, and they have their own historians as well. But I became the reference for the Vancouver Barracks history, and then the Army left the barracks in 2011, and I was still there. And so I volunteer at various times. I do historic walks of the Army Cemetery. If anyone ever gets interested, contact the show, and you guys will forward me the request.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
And
now you're doing. Is
But
that different
ghost
than
walks.
your?
Different than the ghost walks.
It is different. Okay.
Yeah,
So that's totally different. Okay.
yes. The post cemetery is actually some distance from what most people think of as the barracks. So a couple of years ago, I finally eased into giving these ghost walks, and the city of Vancouver owns part of the property, and the National Park Service also owns part of the property of the barracks, and they were justifiably concerned that if we allow ghost walks, once the ghost walk is over with, are people gonna ghost hunter types break into the buildings? Because that does happen. That's one of the bad things about some of these TV shows, or people who think they have a TV show on YouTube. that
They can just go in and
do
whatever
what they want. Yeah.
and it's easier to get forgiveness afterwards than permission first, unless you're in jail, I think. And so I eased into it, and there was not an increase in vandalism, which is good.
Good. Yeah.
And so I mostly over the summers through Halloween would give ghost walks at the barracks. And of course, those had to stop during COVID, and I'm relaunching the ghost walks. And the first set of ghost walks is going to be this weekend after this. Was it now I'm blanking, the 17th?
Today's the
17th.
So tomorrow is the 18th.
Yeah.
So it'll be next week or next weekend.
Yeah.
Next week.
Okay.
Yeah, next Saturday and Sunday.
24th.
24th.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and one of the things that I found funny is, consider people with kids who are interested in the paranormal, like probably us three, at the age of 12 or 13. You're really brave in daylight hours, but not at night. So,
Right.
So actually, as a phenomenon, I tried doing ghost walks on Sunday at noon, and it many times. Family would do something like go to church, go do the ghost walk, and then go to some kind of restaurant for lunch and go home, and then get ready to go back to school or work on Monday.
That's funny.
And so I have a daytime one for that most of the time is families with kids will actually go and attend that. and the Saturday right now it's just Saturday and Sunday. Not every weekend. I'm staggering them because I'm not sure how much interest there's going to be. Again, we're still COVID minded.
Right.
But once we hit October, it'll be Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays.
Nice.
Now, when you did these tours and the walks, have anyone in your groups, hey, seen something or heard something?
Yeah, absolutely. Part of it's interesting when you have somebody say something, and then 2 or 3 walks later, somebody who's totally unrelated says virtually the same thing. Light bulbs kind of come on and say, wow, this is not just somebody whose imagination is running wild, but we have 2 or 3 people saying almost the same thing. There's more something to it. Part of the walk, we take along a split rail fence lining the parade ground. And the parade ground has a history. It's one of these outdoor public haunts.
Is that where the gazebo is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Down from that, yeah. And so you've been on the walk. I stopped 2 or 3 times to relate some stories of history as well as the paranormal. And sorry about that, folks, as I struggle for clarity without going, or as I make some of these stops, particularly into October, I have a light with me. And along that route, when I stopped in one particular place and talk about the ghostly sentry, the lights, which are LEDs, will start flickering. That's happened several times.
Now, I got to ask real quick.
Yeah.
When you're doing it with the lights and stuff, do you actually dress up in period costume? I'm just curious.
No, I don't. I suppose I actually have a replica uniform from the time period, Army uniform from the 1850s. I could, but it's never seemed necessary. Those people who do, God bless them for trying to lend kind of this aura. Having said that, maybe I am stepping back a little bit and saying I don't have to make a parody of it. Not that everybody who dresses in period does that. They want to lend ambiance.
Right.
But not me. I suppose if everybody who attended said, Jeff, we want you to be in period. Yeah, sure. I can do
whatever
that.
So gets the people out there
Yeah.
to learn and
the
appreciate.
ambiance.
And,
Yeah, but
It could go either way.
yeah.
a couple people have actually said, Jeff, the dead are lining the fence, and whenever you stop, that's where a couple of them themselves, they're waiting for you, and they're saying, tell our story.
Wow.
You're telling our stories, Jeff.
Huh.
And this is a couple different unrelated people who told me that. So that is kind of a shivery thing to think about, is they're waiting for me.
Wow.
To tell their story and to keep
telling it. Yeah.
keep telling it. Say, hey, don't forget about us. We,
Yeah.
what we've done to, I'm losing the words, but keep us free or
Bring us back.
bring us. Yeah, exactly.
Bring us back into public memory, at least.
Yeah,
Because that's what history really is. I think that is what fascinates
like living
people
history.
about ghost
Right.
stories. What fascinates people about ghost stories isn't this place is haunted. 'Cause you can get that anywhere, but who is it and why? That story, the
purpose?
backstory. Yeah.
Exactly.
If you think about it, back then, that's all they had was stories to keep the legends alive and everything.
Memories
So
and-
memories, yeah. Now we have video, and audio, but back then they didn't have that. So
Yeah.
you're doing what they would have done back then, and so I think, in a sense, they appreciate that because you're keeping their legacy and their story alive by repeating and telling that their stories.
Mhm.
So.
In some ways, it reminds me of the play Our Town, which is set in a cemetery, and you go from gravestone to gravestone.
Yeah.
And there are some historical societies that do what they call talking tombstones, where somebody will become at a tombstone. They will be in period clothing.
Yeah, I think I've been to one of those at the one over here and off of A2nd. That one over there, Fir
Mhm.
Grove, I think it's called. I believe. Yeah.
I'm not sure.
But yeah.
We did that when I did the Shanghai Tunnel tours in the month of October. We would dress in the period clothing, and yeah, I enjoyed doing that during that time. I wouldn't want to do it for every tour, every every day of the month, but for a month, sure, that was great. But
Yeah.
Or an anniversary.
yeah,
Put on an anniversary. Or
sure,
something,
yeah.
Yeah, and what's funny is I have done some more historically oriented things at the barracks, and I have actually put on period uniform, and that's
knew it.
that's okay.
Uh-huh.
You know, that
I
part's
love that.
okay because
Yeah.
it's because I don't know, and maybe I'll rethink that. If it's okay to be doing a serious history event and dress in costume,
Yeah.
what's wrong with doing a ghost walk and dress in costume?
I think it's great. I think it's a great idea. There's nothing wrong with that.
Other than the fact that this uniform is all scratchy wool.
Well, yeah. Make sure you
okay,
do it
never mind.
during winter months, and colder months for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
What is your favorite part about doing the ghost walk?
It's actually showing people the landscape. In some ways, it is more pleasurable doing it earlier in the summer before the sun goes down, as well as these afternoon walks, because I can take people into the back part of the barracks, and a lot of people don't realize how beautiful it is because you've been on it. Remember, I always stop and say, "Look, these are 2 American chestnut trees.
Yes.
The species is virtually extinct in the United States,
Right.
but here they are." And in these various trees, people, when they sign for the buildings, they would plant trees and do their own landscaping, and some vestiges of that are still there. And these little pathways on the far west side, not too far from the hospital. And when the Army was there, of course, the public were discouraged, if not forbidden, to walk or drive in these areas. Well, the land all belongs to the city of Vancouver now, and the Park Service, so it's the people's buildings. And so just bringing them back and showing them how beautiful this area is. There's an heirloom rose garden that has a whole bunch of benches in it. A lot of people don't realize that's there. Bring a picnic lunch on a sunny day. And so I feel like a combination historian, educator, and representative of the local tourist bureau.
No, I think it's great. You bring a whole new outlook on that area, not just military, but yeah, just the whole scenery. It's just beautiful.
The history.
Everything.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah. Can we
I need to get on one of those.
Yeah, you do.
need
Nudge, nudge.
Right? Yeah.
Can we show the picture with the ghost walk and the website for Jeff, if you don't mind? And then while we do that, you can go to Jeff's website, and what can we find on that website? The ghost walk, among many other things.
Yeah, with that graphic at the bottom is ghostsandcritters.com /ghost walks. Just Ghosts and Critters will get you to the entry page. And I've been maintaining that site for over 20 years. A student friend of mine created it for me. And so, among other things, I have 20 years worth of an archive of what was new. Every year I'll roll it over. And so all the events that I've done for the year are now kind of backdated and saved. And I used to get a lot more people sending me ghost stories when there are so many avenues where people can post their ghost stories on different locations. It's kind of fallen off, but I have an archive of other people's ghost stories from across the Northwest. Me kind of doing a little bit of history, a little bit of ghost technology. If somebody printed it out, it's well over 100 pages of content. And in a way, I'm thinking about redoing it because it's, as my nephew said, Jeff, your website when it was new was all high tech. Now it's like looking at a VW microbus because technology and web technology in particular have outpaced it. But taking a website with that much content and redoing it to something newer and flashier, not an easy thing.
Right.
And so I may well just kind of archive the entire site and just pick up a new format. It doesn't make me happy, but I don't have many other options.
Right. Do you have people submit to you new stories all the time, or?
Not so much anymore because there are so many other blogs and online places that are like national, where you can post your stories at some kind of a site that has every single state in the union, and so people are kind of going for these national sites to put their local ghost stories on, and I kind of miss some of that, because that also is where I would get stories for my books. Is somebody would send me their ghost story, and then I would talk to them, do interviews, maybe investigate, and that would be a story for the next book. So I kind of miss that, selfishly, but also it's just really fun to hear other people's stories.
Right.
Unless they've got something really horrific in their basement.
Right.
It's not quite so much fun.
There's something in the trunk in the basement.
Thump, 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 thump. Chicken
Right.
heart. Thump, thump.
Right.
That's an old. That's an old one from the 1960s. Sorry, folks.
Now, you said you just took a trip back south. Was that having to do with anything with paranormal or your books or military?
It was a lifestyle question. I was in El Paso. Was it San Antonio? I beg your pardon. I'm remembering the Pace Picante commercials.
Get a rope.
Yeah, and made in. Anyway, so I was in San Antonio, which is where the Alamo is. And this is military-related part of it, in that when I was in Afghanistan, I was in what was originally a temporary a hut for temporary people who were just in and out of this particular facility. And I didn't leave, so pretty soon it became my hooch. And then I came in one day after being out on the road, and this was when I was doing military history interviews. I would go from fire base to fire base, interviewing soldiers and others before and after various events. So I came back, and my hooch had a flagpole on it, and there was this flag flying that had a kind of a star and red, white, blue stripes, but it wasn't the American flag. And so I was a little territorial, but I try to have a good sense of humor. So I like, so somebody's not just transitioning in and out; they're putting their own mark on the place. So I came in, and there were two guys in there, and I said, "So, hi, which one of you guys is from Puerto Rico? I noticed the flag out there." And it wasn't a Puerto Rican flag; it was a Texas flag. And so they were both really good natured about it after they unballed their fists and shook my hand, because they're from Texas, is what they do. And we became quite good friends, Tony and Jeff. Unfortunately, Tony and everybody, the Congress just enacted a veterans bill in financing compensation and treatment for people, veterans suffering from respiratory and other illnesses related to the burn barrels. Every war has its own big bad thing that happens to the veterans coming back. Gulf War syndrome, PTSD, Agent Orange, things like that. And so part of the way that you dispose of human waste in the desert, because you don't have any water to like sewer it away, is to save the waste, add some diesel fuel or gasoline to it, and then you burn it.
Wow.
And also the oil fires too. And so Tony got cancer.
Oh no.
And so I kind of got in the loop, and we were scheduled to all of us who were deployed with Tony, that were friends, to meet up. And and getting the airline tickets and everything in COVID and the shots and all that took a lot of planning. And unfortunately, Tony died within a couple of weeks or a week or two before we all came down. But so I went and stayed with Jeff and his wife, and attended San Antonio, among other things. We did our things, but also, because this is paranormal related too, there are, I think, 6 different ghost walks in San Antonio.
Wow.
And so we attended 3 ghost walks, and eventually kind of kind of left out of town a little bit. And there's a town named Fredericksburg, some distance outside of San Antonio, and it was settled by German settlers in the 1850s, 40s and 50s. And so I was in there and talking to some people, some of the local folk, and I because I have no filter, I said, I wonder what German sounds like when somebody has a Texas accent.
Jeez.
And they actually looked a little, but they said, yeah, even now you can walk around the bus stops and where some elderly folk are congregating, they will be speaking in German.
Wow.
And one famous American who was born in Fredericksburg is a guy named Chester Nimitz, who in the late 1800s joined the Navy, and by World War II he was the basically naval commander-in-chief of the Pacific Fleet in his actions.
Wow.
And there's now an aircraft carrier named after him.
Really?
Yeah. But in Fredericksburg there is a massive museum. I probably get the name wrong. It's the Museum of the War in the South Pacific. And his family owned a hotel. His grandfather owned a hotel, and that's adjacent to it, and that's given over to the Chester Nimitz Museum. And they have their own ghost walks too. It turns out that in the Civil War, there were some kind of, I don't know if I'm using this right, jayhawkers. There were some guys who were supposedly part of a Confederate militia that ended up hanging a bunch of people suspected of ties to the North. Who knows? Anyway, one of them was shot to death with his back to one of the trees right outside of that hotel.
Wow.
And that's part of the ghost walk.
Really?
Yeah. And a lot of these Texas towns, because you have Native American settlement, of course, and you have Spanish settlement, some of it dating back to the 1600s, and then Republic of Texas and American settlement in there. People have been living on the landscape with historic records for centuries, and so they accumulate these ghost stories.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah, and of course the Alamo
Yeah.
is a reputation for being haunted within days of Santa Anna's forces killing all the defenders.
Oh, I can imagine.
They ended up he ended up burning the bodies of the Texicans, and because he didn't want any remains left behind to be shown, and so he had sent troops into the chapel, which is what we think of as the Alamo, much bigger complex originally, and they talked about avenging angels and guardian spirits stopping them, and so they actually ran out of the building.
Wow.
This is within days of the end of the
Wow.
fighting.
Wow.
And they don't allow the ghost walks inside.
No, I can imagine.
And I don't know of any Ghost Hunter TV show that's going to get permission in there either.
Sorry, Zach. Is there a particular location that you can think of that you've been to that is just you felt was the most haunted location?
At the Vancouver Barracks, there are two places, the Grant House and the Post Hospital. And you and I have done some things in the Grant House. Now, the Grant House was the first building that the Army in 1849, they laid down the foundations. It's a two-story log cabin. And it was the post commander's residence in combination with being the officer's mess in the post headquarters for many, many years. And over the years, it changed usage. It's essentially a big two-story log cabin. Did I say that?
You did.
Yes.
And its last incarnation of use, it's a restaurant. Now, because of COVID, the restaurateurs ended up having to leave their lease.
Yeah,
So
sad.
the building is empty now. When it was a restaurant, a couple times we met and ate and sat on the veranda and had our mint juleps.
It was so awesome. Just a great place. I mean, we were just talking before the show, obviously, and just to be able to sit there, just think of all that history, of those before us. Yeah. Sitting there, same location, looking out across at that field, sipping iced tea or whatever they were sipping back then.
Almost 200 years of military occupation there. Yeah.
Mr. Andrew, we going to break? All right. Well, we are once again taking a short break, and we are talking to the wonderful Jeff Davis, author, historian, archaeologist, just an all-around nice guy, as you can tell.
Man about town.
Man about town, that's right. Again, you can go to his website, find out all about his books, purchase his books, correct?
Yep.
And his ghost walk. And but when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more, so don't go away. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We are here with Jeff Davis. So, Mr. Davis, let's talk a little bit more about the Vancouver Barracks. And you've been working out of the Vancouver Barracks for a long time, and you just mentioned the Grant House and how the restaurant is no longer there because of COVID. Are there any other businesses that had to fold out at the Vancouver Barracks because of that? Now, obviously, you're starting your walks again, which I'm really happy to learn. And your first one back will be next weekend, Saturday the 24th. Is that correct?
Correct.
And so we did show the website. We'll do that again before we close out the show. But are there any other businesses that folded as well?
In particular, the Grant House concerns me because it was one of these buildings that the general public were like welcomed into, come eat, take part in the history, and they haven't filled it yet. They're actually doing some renovation work on it, necessary repairs and things like that.
Well, I get it, and I'm sorry to interrupt. The reason why I ask that is because it's concerning to me because don't those help keep those buildings going as far as the historical society or whoever is running it? Doesn't that help keep the upkeep for these buildings and grounds? And I'm not exactly sure how that works. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about that, because it's important to keep that history going, obviously.
Yes, the National Park Service and the City of Vancouver are major property owners. There are some other agencies that kind of own or rent a slice of it, but the parade ground, that north of the parade ground, Officers Row, which is where the Grant House is and the other historic buildings, and the western half of the barracks belong to the City of Vancouver. They have an organization known as the Historic Trust that kind of operates as caretakers, and they also rent out the buildings for various temporary functions as well as to tenants. And the National Park Service owns the parade ground all the way down to the replica of Fort Vancouver, and they have their own promotional things that they do as well. And so because of the Officers Row and the western half of the barracks, that's where I do my walks. And so some of these buildings, which were as residences, actually are still rented out to the general public. It brings in income to the city, which some of it gets filtered into maintenance programs. And so most of the what were residences lining Officers Row have been subdivided. Some of them were built as very large duplexes, but they've been subdivided even more as office space for a lot of that. But even on Officers Row, there's still a handful of people who have had leases for years that live there, which I think is nifty, because people are still living in these buildings.
Jeff just said nifty. What? Just for the record, he said nifty.
No.
Yeah.
Hey, you got a problem with being nifty?
He said nifty. Anyways, go ahead.
Is this a drinking game?
No. It just shows our age. My kids would say, "Oh my gosh, he said nifty."
I am actually tempted to say a whole bunch of words that you're going to have to bleep out, but how about that?
We don't bleep out on this network. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah.
I don't mean to be
offensive
rude,
is that?
Jeff.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yes, you do, but that's okay. That's what friends do.
That's right.
It's me personally. This is not meant to be a dig at anybody. I really like the thought of these former residences still being used as residences. I know that in some cases it's not possible, that it's easier and perhaps more profitable to rent them out to businesses. But either way, if somebody's in the building, they last longer than if they're vacant.
Right.
And so in the case of the Grant House, I'm not sure they could earn a lot more money actually renting it out in parcels, subdividing it into office spaces. So I hope that they continue renting it as a restaurant. It's been a restaurant since the 1980s.
Well, I know our next investment. Hey.
Yeah, right.
Open a restaurant. I thought it was awesome having a restaurant there, being able to sit and eat. in such a historic location.
Now, with these people still living in these residences, and you do your walks by these residences?
Yes.
And if so, I mean, have any of them come out and approach you, say, hey, we got such and such going on in here, and give you any information, historical?
More stories, yeah. And sadly enough, one of the buildings, which was open bay barracks, one long room, or 2 or 3 long rooms in one building, with that would have had bunk beds. They've converted into apartments, and unfortunately, this one couple had moved into one of them, and they took the ghost walk, so that they wanted to get a feel of the history for the entire post. They said, "Sorry, we haven't had anything bad happen." So at least their spot is not haunted, or so they believe.
Right.
And even before the Army left, these large buildings that line the south end of the parade ground, these massive buildings, those were troop barracks. And I was in and out of these buildings too, and a lot of us shared stories, especially as we were getting ready to close down the barracks and leave. A lot of people reminiscing, and then I got nudged in the elbow, in the ribs. Jeff, let me tell you what happened to me. Now that we're leaving, I can tell this story. So I got a lot of them that way.
Have you seen anything on any of your walks?
I've never seen an apparition anywhere, which is kind of, for me,
that's pretty much, I think, high on anybody's bucket list, so to speak.
Yeah. To see an apparition.
To see one.
Yeah. And it, of course, is the rarest thing to happen too.
Right.
If you're not psychic, psychic people, depending on their skills or their gifts, some of them hear, some of them see, some of them feel. But for somebody like a block like me, yes, I'd love to see one.
Yeah.
And but I have had things happen.
No, you also have, because you're an archaeologist, you also collect certain items. And are any of the items, have you been told that they're haunted items?
I have a clock when I have an electric clock that's a mantelpiece clock, and it's designed to look like an 18th century Victorian mantle clock, and that when you plug it in, it generally stops, I think, at 3:15.
Really?
I haven't had it plugged in a while, but yes.
On purpose, or?
There's got to be some sort of significance
for 3:15.
For 3:15.
Yeah. And
you need to bring that. We'll need to do a little investigation.
Okay. I have a Philippine kris, which is a wavy bladed knife that was used associated with a violent death. And I'm morbid. And I have some other objects. One of the things, if I told you I would go around with clairvoyance, and I've done some little workshops with people. My workshop idea is a little bit different than some people who are clairvoyant or believe they are, who bring in workshops and let's develop your psychic abilities and we'll look at auras and see that kind of stuff. Because I'm not, I can't see anybody's aura, but I'll do little tests. Where do your skills lie? And there is a branch of psychic investigations called psychometry. That is, you get impressions from an object. And so I have various very, very old objects in what was my college teaching collection, and I know the history behind them or some of the design or their origin, and I will actually hand those to people to do psychometry readings.
We got together for a specific deal, you and I and a couple other people. Can't really mention, but you brought some very old items that I had the honor of holding, and it's amazing to be able to hold something from, and I can't remember what century they were from at this point. But
one or two of the objects, 1800 BC.
So
almost
unbelievable to be able to actually hold in your hand, or even be in the presence of, let alone hold in your hand, something that old that still exists. I've always been interested in archaeology. It's something I wanted to pursue early in life, and I'm even more excited now, especially becoming a paranormal investigator. Just goes along with history, knowing history, learning history. So that is just unbelievable to me. So yeah, I guess I don't have a question there. It was just, I'm in awe by these objects, and and even haunted objects. Why do I mean, that's a whole nother show. But yeah, I'm just fascinated by these objects,
which is why people collect them. And if you really consider, if you're an archaeologist, or you buy in a shop licensed, right? Licensed, don't steal, don't dig illegally.
Yes.
Consider, and I purchased some of these items. Well, I purchased all these items legally, but some of them I purchased like in shops in London. And so talking to the shop owner, this one bowl, it had, the provenience on this was that it had just been dug up. And this one bowl was probably 300 AD. So 1700 years old.
Wow.
And so
300 AD.
It was buried complete. It's not broken.
Wow.
But
that's even more impressive.
From the time when that person lost it till when I got it, there were only 2 or 3 people who touched it.
Wow.
And so if somebody was going to do psychometry, whose impressions are going to be on there the strongest is the person who actually really owned it and put it to use.
Do you still own this object?
I do.
Yeah.
It's a.
I'm going to your house after the show.
but nobody else. Okay. That did happen once,
right.
many years ago.
Really?
And there were some other times when back there used to be these things called phone books, where a couple of fans. Why do some people do paranormal investigations at 2 a.m? But there were a couple of fans who were scared, and so they got the phone book and called every J. Davis in the phone book till they got me.
Wow.
Like 2 a.m. And while I appreciate people wanting my advice, not at 2 a.m.
Wow.
And every other J. Davis before me.
Wow. Andrew, let's do 10 till instead, and because there's a couple of other things that I wanted to bring up. People that want to meet you in person, because you're extremely famous. People are lined up around the block as we speak here at the studio, undisclosed location, in Portland. I think we have your address that we're going to pop up on screen in just a moment. No, I'm just kidding.
2 a.m.
We wouldn't do that. But no, Oregon Ghost Conference. So people can meet you at the Oregon Ghost Conference. They can meet you at the Ghost Walk starting next Saturday, correct? Your website. They can go to your website. They can get, if we can flash that one more time, Andrew, I'd appreciate it. Thank you so much. That way people can they can purchase your books. They can get tickets for the walk. Yes, sir. Yep. They can also, let's talk a little bit about, I could talk about archaeology and all these objects and all this stuff, but this would be a 10-hour show and you'd be asleep, and probably our viewers and everybody else. But the Oregon Ghost Conference is another great place, and we're going to do a whole show on the Oregon Ghost Conference with Rocky coming up soon. But we can also get a hold of you and meet you. People can meet you at the informal. Talk about the informal pub.
Sure. Paranormal pub. I call it the Vancouver's Informal Paranormal Pub, and it's a Facebook group. And in order to find out about the, when we're meeting, it is a closed group, mostly because I don't want to spam people. How many of us send it all to friends, and then the friends get mad at us? You're spamming me with this crap. So you have to request to join. Again, the Vancouver Informal Paranormal Pub on Facebook. And we're relaunching actually this Sunday. So Tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Yes. Oh, that'd
Yeah.
be Sunday.
And of course, we're not going to name where it is or anything like that.
Oh, yes, actually.
Okay.
Because this isn't a place in Vancouver. One of the things I don't like crossing the Columbia River through traffic, rush hour traffic, but there are various paranormal pubs that go on the Oregon side, but none of them on the Vancouver side.
Now, what do you guys discuss during these?
It's funny. I originally started saying we're not going to do a lot of presentations. Let's just get together, hang out, and talk about the paranormal. And so that's primarily been what we've been doing. Having said that, this place that hosts us is Vancouver's only underground bar. It's called the and they're going to kill me. The Underbar. The Underbar. And they're a haunted locale. Now they used to open up just for us because they were not open on Sundays, but post-COVID they're open Sundays, which is why it's open to the general public.
Okay.
Now it's just the announcement is through our channels, but anybody's welcome to come down. Tomorrow they open at noon. I'll be setting up at about 2:30, 3 o'clock. We'll gather, but because I'm friends with the Underbar owners and staff, I'm trying to boost their public profile. And they have all these events that they do throughout the week and weekends. So I'll be doing a presentation on Vancouver and Portland ghosts. And that'll start at 4, and at the end we'll do raffles. I'll be raffling off a couple of books, a couple of actually tickets. Maybe if somebody shows up, they can get in the raffle.
Actually, do you have anything you would like to send with me? I'm going to be going tomorrow. So if you have something that you would like to raffle, maybe from your new team.
I don't have that stuff yet. That's still,
okay.
Yeah, I'm waiting for it to arrive.
What kind of team are you that you don't have your own memorabilia?
Come on now.
A new team. Just getting started.
Started it in February. Obviously, COVID of last year. Obviously, everything shut down.
We're just giving you a hard time.
I know it. But still, you know.
But at least,
I'm working on getting all that stuff now.
At least you've got a cool acronym, right?
That's right.
Every paranormal team has to have an acronym.
That's right.
Yeah.
GAPS.
Absolutely.
That's okay because I haven't reordered anything yet. So
see,
we're all just coming out, out of this stuff.
Another reason why I don't have a team is I don't have to have memorabilia. I got books.
I got books. I've got books. I'm Jeff. I'm just teasing you.
No, more seriously, and I tell people this, is I'm like a J lister if you want to talk about star rating.
Oh my gosh, come on.
But in the month of October, I'm an I lister.
An I lister?
Yeah, you're an I lister. In Halloween time, you're an H lister.
Okay, explain that a little bit.
Well, because everybody wants to talk to ghost hunters in October, don't they?
They do.
Yeah. That was one of those lessons to me, and I know we take us off the tangent a little bit, but when I was first started out, I was one of the few people in the Portland, Vancouver area who did the paranormal openly, and so I was always getting these calls to do in autumn to do talk about ghost television, radio, things like that. And one time I had to put off this one TV station, and then November 2nd or 3rd I called them up and said, hey, I'm free now. They said, sorry, you're not hot anymore.
Oh my gosh, are you serious?
Maybe next October, Jeff.
Oh my gosh.
But you know what? This is a lesson, isn't it? You got to understand.
Yeah.
Just like getting asked back on a paranormal TV show if you don't own your own.
Right.
Yeah, but you guys, you're the host. You invite us, and so if I upset you guys, sorry about that whole memorabilia.
No. You're always welcome. You're always welcome. You know what's funny? One of the funniest interviews, it wasn't during the interview, it was after the interview, but it was Channel 12, KPT. What is it?
KPTV.
It was. I can't remember her name right now, and that's okay. But she probably would prefer I not say who she is. But it was for the Oregon Ghost Conference, so they had me a couple of times. And so after the interview, she's like, "I am so scared of ghosts and the whole paranormal and da 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 da." And she asked me this. This is after the interview, after we had been on camera, and she and the weather lady. And if I told you who it was, everybody would know who they are. And so she asked me specific questions about different locations I had been to and the scariest things, and she was absolutely terrified. And it's amazing how many people are scared and terrified, and which leads to, you know, everybody being home because of COVID, and with spirit activity, and, you know, ramped up in homes and things like
things
that.
Things are more noticeable now.
Exactly.
Right to the forefront. Yeah.
And so, have you noticed that? Maybe not in your own home, but people maybe contacting you or through friends or whoever, telling you more stories now than ever.
Those people I've been in contact with, yes, but this is the interesting thing. People are isolated, so they're not in contact with me specifically, so they can't share the stories. I've not gotten a lot of emails about that, and so I've not met live with a lot of people. I anticipate this is what's going to be happening, as you two pointed out. But we don't have time to talk about this now, but I spent most of a year going out to my father's house. He had died early in COVID, and it took me over a year to fix up his house and sell it. And so it was a little bit odd sometimes. I never saw his apparition in the house. You know, I'm telling this also for the people who are now living there. No, I didn't have anything too spooky happen, but I was anticipating it too. And
well, I'm sorry for your loss. You know.
Thanks. It was his time. It was his time.
And as you know, I just lost my mom too, and so, but yeah, it's been a tough time for us all.
Yeah.
And, you know, between loss, you know, family and friends, and those who lost, and it had nothing to do with COVID, as far as my mom, and and so, but yeah, a lot of people have noticed a lot happening, and people that didn't really believe before are really starting to question and believe now. Have you noticed anything like that?
Not as of yet. I mean, you know,
maybe we'll get feedback.
Yeah.
People watching.
Yeah, and we encourage viewers and listeners, if you've noticed things like this, or you have questions, or you have a topic that you would like us to discuss, or a guest that you would like to have us on, let us know. We want to hear from you, honestly. Send us an email. Go to our Facebook page. Send us a message through talkcastpdx.com or the Facebook page. We would love to address that, because we want to hear from you. Absolutely. You matter to us. So please send us a message, send us an email, and let us know. We would love to address any issues that you may have. Maybe you're experiencing these things at home, or you have a question for Jeff or something.
If you've got questions and need answers, I mean, that's what we're here for.
We're here to help, and we're all learning. We're all learning together.
Absolutely.
So, and that's what it's about. It's about us all pulling our resources together. And if it's something that I can't help you with, or James can't help you with, or Darren, we know wonderful people like Jeff and June that we've had on.
We have connections.
We have a lot of connections. So we will be more than happy to try to get the answer that you're seeking, and try to get you the help that you need, or just try to help you. So, and again, tomorrow is the informal paranormal pub.
Yes.
I can never get it straight.
And that's held monthly, or?
Yeah, we're going to do it monthly, and sometimes we're always going to try and do it on Sundays. It is not going to be it's not going to be a regular on these particular Sundays, because events happen.
Sure.
Right. And so that's another reason why to sign up for it, to get on the list. And oftentimes we'll be posting other promotional things going on, like this show. Posted in the Paranormal Pub, posted a link.
Yes.
And the Oregon Ghost Conference posts there too. I try not to post too much stuff, because then it starts looking like somebody else's website.
Like
Right.
me,
Yeah, right.
like I was over posting. I felt so bad. I just kept posting and posting all these, every time we were going to have a guest or whatever for the show. And Jeff's like, because it buried other things.
Right.
And
That are more important.
But if we could post his or put up a picture of his website one more time and the Ghost Walk. Tell us the name of the Ghost Walk again.
Spirit Tales of the Vancouver Barracks.
I just
What a name.
love that name. And I love that walk, and you will too. So go to Jeff's website, and you can purchase tickets through that. You can also purchase his books.
I recommend the books.
I
as
do
well.
too.
Well, thank you very much.
I recommend anything that Jeff does.
Yeah,
So.
I got 4 of his books.
And if you can't make it to the pub tomorrow, of course I can't. Anyways, if you can't make it tomorrow, then meet him at the Ghost Conference, the Oregon Ghost Conference. It'll be next March. OregonGhostConference.com. You can read all about it, find out the schedule, because we are going to start meeting again for next year. But yeah, please see us on our Facebook page. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, topics, get a hold of us. We'll be more than happy to help you out. Thank you again for joining us for Paranormal Crossings.
Into the light.
Oh, we've all seen it. Thank you again, Jeff Davis. We appreciate
Absolutely
you
appreciate
being
it.
on. You're
Thank
more
you.
than welcome to come back anytime. After those episodes air again, it'll be October. Is that what you said?
Yeah, that's kind of when they're forecast. We can also talk about that white people.
Oh yes.
That white people
Later.
shit?
Yes. Yes. Do we have time?
No.
No, I don't think we have time. So we'll get into that next time. I did enjoy that, and you got to watch it. So I'll send it to you, a link to
Please
it.
do.
So, all right. Thanks again. I am Aaron, and this is
James. Thanks.
and this is Jeff.
And
You
I'm
have
Jeff.
a great day.
Thank you all.
Peace.